a peculiar responsibility in the world. It wasn't our choice. It wasn't something that we made up. It was God's choice. And when God makes a choice, our responsibility is to recognize it and then walk in consonance with it. So in walking in the light of the year, our exceptionalism. And I said, this exceptionalism results in expansionism and perfectionism. There are three factors that are required for us as a ministry. And every pastor and every leader must bear this in mind. Number one, I already stated that, but understand that this is the number one factor for our winning in 2025. Number one, we must act as though it depended only on us. There's a fire in your spirit that nothing can quench if you think like this. Paul had this mentality. He said, woe is me if I preach not the gospel. He said, necessity is laid upon me. Necessity is laid upon me. He understood the responsibility. And he was going to take the message to all the world. But you see, he was only allowed that much, how far he could go, because God had a plan. He had us in mind. And he knew so many more will come into the world. But Paul's message has continued through us, fulfilling his vision. That's wonderful. Almost none of us who understands the gospel would ignore the message of Paul the apostle. You really have to be ignorant to ignore it. So we must act as though it depended only on us. In the consciousness of the responsibility, we pray like that. See, we have to think like that, as though it depended only on us. So in your church, think like that. If it rested on you, what are you going to do? If your church were the only church in that country, in that state, in that city, what are you going to do? Are you going to be crawling the way you would crawl if many others were there, and then you thought all you needed to do was just some little bit? Or are you going to work as though so much was required of you? I think that's what you would do. You have to act as though It all depended on you. Just remember that. If your church were the only church in the country, the way you're doing now, is this what you would do? If your church were the only church in the city, is this what you would do? Your evangelical program, your work in ministry,